Most of D&D is improv. We make it up as we go. It's a game of make-believe, and you can spend all the time in the world prepping for any eventuality, but Dungeons & Dragons is what happens at the table. That's what really brings the game to life and makes those funny moments that we're going to remember long into the future. So in this video, I'm going to go over 4 methods for improvisation that DMs and players can use to try to prepare themselves for a session without overdoing it. And I'm going to share 5 tips that DMs and players can use to actually flesh out that material on the fly. And honestly, I'm trying to apply it to this video, because I normally script everything word for word, but it seemed weird to make a video about improvisation and write a script for it. So here we go. Hey, Bob here, and welcome to Bob World Builder, where we learn how to have more fun playing D&D together. So hit that subscribe button for new guides every Wednesday under your subscriptions tab. So I came up with these 4 methods for improvisation by looking at the possibilities as a spectrum. You can go from fully scripting your session, which is impossible, to the kind of popular alternative of preparing nothing whatsoever, which I have done in the past, and it's good for something like a one-shot where nothing really matters and when it's over, but it will often lead to situations that break the game or break the tone of your game going forward. So in between the script and the blank slate, let's start with the framework or the skeleton. It's basically creating a very structured outline that can look kind of like a mind map. Maybe you draw this out on a blank piece of paper with pictures and words, and you're connecting dots between them. So you know this plot point, this item, this NPC all link up, and your players can touch on any one of those things to connect to all the others. I really like it because it is non-linear. The framework can move and stretch in multiple directions, kind of like an actual skeleton, the other name I gave it, and in that way it provides a literal backbone for whatever you're going to build on in that session. The framework is by far the most structured, it's a pretty popular method, but it involves the most work. And for all of these methods, something that's really important is taking notes during the session, especially when you're doing a lot of improv, because if you're making it up on the fly, you're going to forget it very quickly. So make sure you or a player takes good notes during the session. That will really help you prepare as little as you need to for the next one. And the next method after the framework is simple bullet points. This is a very popular structure for creating a speech, or if you're practicing in debate. It's something they recommend because if you try to script everything out word for word and then memorize it, you're often going to lose your place and then not know how to get back to it and recover. So where the framework method gives you a lot of places to recover and branch to a new topic if you have to, the bullet points are a lot simpler, and in that way they can seem more restrictive. It's linear, it's sequential. You think you're going to be going to one thing to another thing to another thing, but oftentimes your players are not going to follow that structure. And really, you're going to be creating a framework in your notes as you go along. So while the bullet points may work well for something like a speech that you want to improvise for an important NPC character, getting a beginning line that's really strong, honestly, that's a really great way to prepare for a session, is to start with a very strong first bullet point and then see what happens. But overall, this bullet point structure probably isn't ideal for playing D&D. What does work really well is an alternative that I've called the scatter plot, pun intended, because rather than having linear bullet points or a framework that you are choosing how to connect all these points in space, you just have points. So probably on a piece of paper that you're using to prepare for your session, you've listed out 5 or 6 important points. Again, this could be an NPC, a location, an item, a secret. Secrets should probably be the bulk of them. And you, the DM, have no idea how these are going to interconnect. Some idea is kind of useful, but you're leaving it up to your players to draw those lines, metaphorically. And a great way to use this scatterplot method as a DM is to just write down on a blank piece of paper the names of all the characters in your party, giving them some space around each other. As your session moves along, you can keep track of who's had little involvement with each other, with NPCs, with locations, with items, and then try to put a little more effort into preparing something for them the next time. And for a player in D&D, this scatterplot method works really well for plotting out your goals of things you want to accomplish. So if you want to one day become a king or a lich, or a Lich King. Because as you meet NPCs, as you encounter items or monsters or new locations, you're going to be drawing lines between that goal of Lich King to the items you'll need along the way, to the spells you'll want to learn, to the people that are in your way to do so. And then between sessions, you can talk to your DM and say, hey, I have this cool goal I'd like to achieve as a character. It might seem a little outlandish if you really go with something like Lich King, but you will already have a sort of framework about how you could get there, and you can work with your DM to make it happen. But this is going to come up later when we get to the methods of actually fleshing stuff out. And so the fourth method here between our scripting and our blank slate is the nugget. It's when you have just one idea for a session, one thing that everything else is going to branch off of. It will be that strange dungeon that they've heard about in town, or that magical item, which is probably in a strange dungeon, or a monster they want to hunt, or a person they need to hunt down because they know something about this dungeon or this item or this monster. And this way, you'll be super focused on finding anything possible to branch your scatterbrained players back to that one thing. So no matter whichever direction they take, you'll be focused on that one important piece of information. Now, before we cover these 5 tips to keep in mind while you're actually improvising during a session, let me know in the comments which of those 4 methods you think work best for you. Do you use a framework, bullet points, scatter plot, or that nugget idea? Or have you ever tried to run a session, blank slate, totally freestyle, no prep whatsoever? And how did it go? And if you're into this totally improvised content, check out my Patreon where I have a podcast with my fiancée Grace and we talk about all things D&D, or a brand new podcast started by 2 of my D&D tuber friends, Matthew Perkins and Anto. I don't know Anto's last name. Matt and Anto, called No Plan, No Problem. It's available on YouTube and I'll have a link down in the description. Now, the best tip I can possibly give you for fleshing out this material that you've sort of tried to structure before your session is calling on your fellow players. This is what actual improv, comedy, or storytelling is really all about. Bouncing those ideas off other people and saying yes to whatever they come up with. Not only will that help you get in the mindset of really working as a group and thinking together and trying to achieve a common goal, but it also goes a long way to just keeping your story moving and on track in one way or another. And that is why DMs should not always say yes. Think of saying no as a way to prune off those few ideas that are going to ruin the framework you're really trying to build for the campaign. It's an important tool, but one that should be used sparingly and always as a no but. Like when a player in my Patreon campaign went up to a bison that a guard was riding, a clockwork bison mind you, and went, yip yip.
What was it that kid said? Yeehaw, hup hup, wahoo, yip yip?
I did not give him what he probably wanted. I did not have the bison take off into the sky with this guard, because it would have made the scene a little too ridiculous for what I was trying to do at the time. But something I'm doing with that, which I think will transpire in a few days based on when this video is going to come out, is have that yip yip successfully make a bison fly in a very important moment of our campaign. So hold on to those times you say no and see when you can turn it into a yes later on. But another important way to use this as a player or a DM is to just ask your fellow players around the table, hey, what's one thing you notice about that orc as you rush up to strike it? Or when you have to improvise an NPC innkeeper as they've walked into a place that you didn't know existed until a minute ago, you can ask them, hey, what does the innkeeper look like? You can even have them come up with a name. That way you don't have to pause the game to even look at a table, which you've hopefully prepared, of random names and appearances for NPCs. It just happens naturally because you've redirected it to make the player make the decision. But if you're the DM and you're describing a scene, you often can't rely on your players to fully flesh it out for you. You have to do the bulk of the work here. So tip number 2 is to just follow your gut. And it's kind of all wrapped up with tip number 3. So maybe there are really only 4 tips here, because the next one is to use your senses. Following your gut, thinking about that scene, what you see as you're walking into this market square. What do you smell? What do you hear? Just being present in that moment and going with the flow. For example, I totally lost track of which number this is, and that's something I can't really correct. But the next one is to defy your instincts. Something that I typically run into with this problem is when I'm thinking of an NPC on the fly who I didn't make up ahead of time. There often end up being a middle-aged man, just maybe balding, just very basic looking dude. A human, they're boring, their name is John or James or Jameson. Sorry to all those Johns and James out there. But hey, I would never use Bob for just some random character. So it's great to take a moment and think, wait, what would make this more interesting or a little bit unexpected? Why is that little kid NPC street urchin so eloquent? How is that old woman at the bar downing shot after shot? And why is this merchant selling everything so cheap? And for players, this takes the form of just letting yourself be surprised by your character. This is actually a topic I wanted to make a video about a long time ago and never got around to it. But when I was playing a knowledge domain deep gnome cleric in Grace's Out of the Abyss campaign, he kept a book of all his travels, meticulously writing everything down. And at some point we were traveling on rivers through the Underdark, all linked up to the Dark Lake, and our boat started to capsize. And in one of the purest in-character moments I ever had, I was terrified of going into the water because my book would be ruined. I was able to totally spontaneously come up with their reaction to this scene. And it was not something that I or most of the characters I play would have done. And the last tip, which is also one of the most important, is to take a minute and breathe. You can feel a lot of pressure to keep the game moving very quickly, but if you're running for new players or ones who are just really grateful to be at the table in the first place, don't be so pressured to keep the game fast, because honestly, it probably seems fast to them. Once you've DM'd just a few times and started to put these methods and these other tips into practice, you'll be surprised at how quickly you can keep the game moving. But it might not seem quick to you because you're so used to doing it. So always be ready to step back and circle back to that first point of letting your players kind of take the wheel. Remember that it is just a game and we're all making this story together, not just the DM. Allowing everyone to have a voice is what will make your stories great and make your memories of those games last forever. So if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And thank you to all my new patrons, Jason, Ava, Corey, Brandon, Michael, Macamac, Dana, Elijah, Zach, and Chet. Thank you for all your support, and keep building.